What's going on, y'all? Welcome to another Quick Tip Tuesday. Today, we're going to be going over flounder fishing and, in particular, where to locate flounder during a high tide. But before we get into that, make sure y'all subscribe to the channel. We put out content like this all the time. Next Tuesday, we're going to talk about low tide fishing spots for flounder. So to be sure you see all of that content, make sure y'all hit the subscribe button. Also, consider supporting us on Patreon. We put all kinds of insider information on Patreon. So go over there, check that out, and consider supporting us. But without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into this. Alright, so we're talking about high tide fishing spots for flounder. There's three main areas that I like to target when looking for flounder during a high tide. One of the first of those areas are going to be points. Okay, so you notice this little spot right here. This is a pretty good flounder hole out on Dolphin Island in Alabama. And if you see right here, we got point after point after point, right? And these are the perfect points to find flounder because you got a lot of submerged grass around these points. But what's going to happen is these flounder are going to pull in around these points because this bait is coming in close to land right here. That tide's pushed up into the grass, and you'll notice all around the edges right here, you're going to see a lot of bait fish, a lot of mullet, a lot of shrimp around in these areas. So what these flounder are going to do is pull up, stage up around these points and try to ambush that bait. So what you want to do is try to position your kayak, your boat, whatever you have, out off of the point. And my approach, I like to throw diagonally through the point, working my way back across. Same thing. So if I start here throwing diagonally, I'll work it, fan across it until I'm facing this way and throwing diagonal across the point there. But that is a good approach and way to hit those points. But moving on to the second spot that I would look to target flounder on during a high tide is going to be creek mouths. So you got this main mouth right here. I will fan across this mouth, but it's not really the type of mouth that I'm looking for. What I'm looking for is something like this right here. So you see you got this creek that runs all the way back up in here, and I want to throw this mouth. And if you see, there's a lot of sand build up, mud, sand build up right here. So when your low tide pulls water out of these creek mouths, this creek is pushing mud and sand and all this other stuff out here to the mouth, and it's building it up, and it's making kind of a shallow mound, if you will. And it's a perfect place for flounder to stage up because it's skinny water, because it's shallower here than it is anywhere else around here. Even in the mouth right here, it's going to be a little bit deeper. But you got this mound that's been built up. Those flounder are going to get there because it's skinny, and that bait, when it gets flushed out of this mouth or it comes around this area, it's going to hang out around this shallower water, and it's an excellent place for flounder to ambush their prey. So if you look, same thing around these areas, all these creek mouths, they tend to have a shallower little area right there at the mouth of the creek. So make sure you're hitting those areas, and you will find flounder staged up and stacked in there. I've had days to where I've caught, 4 or 5 flounder on one little creek mouth because they're stacked in there so thick. All right, so moving on to the third area that I like to target, and this is my most productive area. It's my favorite way to try to pin down and target flounder, and that's going to be fishing flooded grass. All right, so narrowing down right here, right? All of these banks are loaded with grass. So I would start maybe on this little area right here. Maybe I come in here and I fish this creek mouth, and once I get through fishing the creek mouth, I'm going to run down these banks because all of this bank is nothing but flooded grass. This whole marsh system really is nothing but flooded grass, but it's got good sandy bottom too, which is awesome. If you can find flooded grass with a sandy bottom, fish it for flounder because they're there for sure. But just working parallel to the bank, throwing as tight to the grass as you can, and you'll notice in that grass there'll be pockets where there's no grass deeper up into the marsh. Make sure you're pitching and throwing around in those areas because those flounder are going to get as tight to that grass as possible, because that's where the life is. That's where your shrimp and your bait fish and all of that is kind of hanging out. So a little example of that would be, I don't know if you can even see it on here, but let's just hypothetically say this is a mound of grass, this is a mound of grass, and then you have a little pocket right here. Make sure you're throwing around the points of that pocket deep up in that pocket, and pulling on out and around. And you can see a little bit right here, you got flooded grass that extends further off of this little point. Never shy away from flooded grass. Same thing right here. This is nothing but flooded grass around in this area. And during a high tide, I find that to be the most productive way to target flounder. Is to target flooded grass. I mean, the flounder just love getting up in there. But that is 3 spots that I would look to target flounder during a high tide. Once again, next week we're going to talk about low tide spots for flounder. So be sure to subscribe to the channel, and we'll see y'all next week.